go live briefly to this to just show you what we are offering this spring at Halkyon. If you're maybe new here, you maybe haven't heard of this yet, but I am I've been building an online philosophy academy for the past 4.5 years, and I just completed a course on Plato's Politeia, and we have 3 courses this spring that we will be teaching. I'll just go over them briefly. If you have any questions on these courses, just put them in the chat and I'll get to them at the end. The academy is called Halkyon, named after the mythic kingfisher, the ice bird, and also often mentioned by Friedrich Nietzsche. And let me just click on the link here. Yes, so the first course we'll be teaching, we'll be offering this spring is a course that John Vervaeke will teach, which is this one, Ultimate Reality, God and Beyond. That begins next week, Friday, April the 5th. We will be meeting 8 times. The full lecture and seminar dates can be found in the enrollment webpage, which is here. Anyone just joining now, if you have a question for me on our courses this spring, just let me know in the chat and I'll get to you in the end. So this is John's course. He describes his course as follows. The course will explore philosophical attempts to understand the human relationship to ultimate reality, not just in conceptual terms, but in how people are existentially transformed by this relationship. What does this mean for us in an age of declining belief in the traditional theistic God, the global encounter with non-Abrahamic religions, and the development of sophisticated cognitive science of religion? So this is how John describes his course. You can now enroll in it. The way it works is that John will lecture for the first about 45 minutes, and after the 45-minute lecture you'll be sent off into smaller discussion groups. Those lectures are recorded, the discussion groups aren't recorded. After about 10-15 minutes in the discussion group, we'll bring you back to a group discussion with John for about 45 minutes. So all in 2 hours, maybe sometimes a bit longer, maybe 2.5 hours. So taught by John Vervaeke, discussion led by John Vervaeke as well. That will begin next week. That course I think is good for anyone who's interested in John Vervaeke's work in general, or perhaps if you're interested in the development of some sort of cognitive science, religiosity or theology, something that's been it's been brewing for some decades. It is an attempt, I think, to not only move beyond Abrahamic religions, but also to weave together in a Neoplatonistic manner the different spiritualities. And what we'll be reading at the course is The Nothingness Beyond God by Robert Carter, which is on Nishida. Evolutionary Religion by Schellenberg. Then 3 papers by James Filler on the oneness pure relation. And The Divine Matrix by Bracken. So John will teach 2 lectures plus seminars on each of these works, so 8 in total. will be meeting beginning this Friday, and the last meeting is on June 21st. So John has a few commitments in May. There will only be 2 meetings in May, but that actually gives you a bit of time to catch up on the readings. If you want to be in a digital classroom, virtual classroom with John Vervaeke, then this course should be good for you. If you don't have time to make it to, I would say, 5 of the live lectures, then you could enroll in the self-study tier, which is this one. So you'll get access to the recordings. They won't be made available on his course. If you have time for, let's say, at least 5, then you should join this tier here. That's the one for you. I think there's one more of these dialogue sessions if you want to take 1 hour of private dialogue with John. There's also a payment plan. If you're interested, so if you take a look at the enrollment page, as I said, if you have any questions on any of the courses, just let me know. I'll get to you in the end. So this is John's course. I'm teaching a course on Kant, Immanuel. Which is this one. Immanuel Kant would have been 300 years this April 22nd. If finitude hadn't caught up with him, then again, he was a philosopher of finitude. So, we'll be reading, for the most part, the Critique of Pure Reason, which I have here in the original German. Also, I'll be reading the German, but of course, the language of the course will be English, and we'll be using the Cambridge translation by Alan Wood and Paul Geyer, which is a very good translation, a complete translation of both editions. We'll be focusing for about 6 weeks out of the 9 weeks. We'll be focusing on the first critique, mainly on we'll begin on the introduction. We want to understand Kant's project. This course, by the way, I should mention, begins on Saturday, the 20th of April. Let me just go over this here briefly. So if you scroll down, you find all seminar dates, 20th, 27th May, then there's a reading week in between to give you some time to catch up on the reading, and then 4 more sessions in June. So I will be lecturing for about 30 to 45 minutes in the beginning, then send you off into breakout sessions, and afterwards we'll have a group discussion for about an hour, maybe a bit longer. Usually people stay quite long, so it might be longer than an hour, but we'll find out. If you don't have time for the group seminars, you take the self-study option. If you want to read Kant this year, you don't have to follow along in 9 weeks. You can do this on your own pace. Group seminars are led by me. So I'll be doing the live lectures. They'll be recorded, so you have access to the recorded sessions afterwards, recorded lectures, etc. There's also, if you want to read or discuss Kant with me more intensely even, then you could also book 5 tutorials with me. So we'll be focusing on, if you scroll down on the enrollment page, you can see this. If you have any questions on Kant, by the way, just let me know in the chat. Maybe I'll answer them in the end if you have a question on the course, etc. So I'm just here to briefly introduce our spring term at Halkyon this year. So we'll first begin on the Copernican revolution, what it is that Kant is setting out to do in the first critique that we will be reading as a work of transcendental logic. a revolution of the form of thought and not an epistemology, as I always say. If Kant had written something as benign as an epistemology, he wouldn't really have revolutionized philosophy the way that he did. We will then go to the transcendental aesthetic, so-called, has nothing to do with art, but everything to do with sense perception, or so it seems, but, well, really it has to do with the necessary conditions of sense perceptions and the forms of intuition, time and space. So he'll be focusing on time and space, but also transcendental apperception also, and as well as transcendental. We'll begin on transcendental logic here as well. The third lecture focuses on more of the transcendental logic and transcendental idealism, the distinction that Kant draws between phenomena and noumena, and why he introduces this. So we'll be moving back and forth in the book actually a little bit. So we won't just go, we won't just read this linearly. We'll be focusing on different sections, focusing in very specifically. So we won't be reading every single chapter, and we won't be reading everything in the chapters that we're reading. We'll be focusing in on the most important parts of the book. We'll also take a look at the refutation of idealism. As you may know, Kant thought it the disgrace of philosophy that it had come so far that philosophy would deny the existence of the external world. Then, perhaps, not perhaps, but definitely the most important section in the book is the transcendental deduction, the justification for the categories and how the categories apply to the objectivity of objects. We'll also consider the schematism, and after that lecture, I'm pretty much open what we'll do in lecture 5 and 6. I suggest that we look at the transcendental dialectics and the antinomies of reason here and the paralogism. However, we could also do something else. That depends on the group, how the group develops. So we'll be looking at also lecture 6. For now, I have the architecture of reason, why Kant thinks that the critical path is still open. We might here look ahead towards Fichte and Hegel a bit and see how the transcendental project continues after Kant. Then after 6 lectures on the first critique, we are moving to the critique of practical reason. We'll be spending 1 lecture and 1 seminar together on the introduction, basically, and what Kant means by practical reason, why practical reason has primacy over pure and speculative reason. So we'll see that, to put it simply, pure reason grounds and practical reason, why that primacy is important. And we'll here also consider transcendental freedom. After that lecture, we'll move to the third critique, the critique of judgment, or the critique of the power of judgment, depending on your translation, where we'll be looking at the sublime, which is quite different from what is Burkean sublime, Kant's understanding of nature and of genius. So not so much judgment, but we want to understand how Kant here tries to reach back out into nature. As he says at the beginning of the first critique, the attempt is to write the preparation for a metaphysics of nature, something that he never got around to doing. So I hope that you, in this year of Immanuel Kant, you can join me when we read Kant together and honor his legacy. If you have any interest in any post-Kantian philosopher of any significance, even those who deny the significance of Kant, who come after him, you need to have a good grounding in Kant's critical philosophy. So be that phenomenology, if that's Husserl, Kant, Heidegger, or Merleau-Ponty, for example, the neo-Kantians, Cassirer or Paul Nathorp, or or of course any of the other German idealists, so-called Fichte, or more properly perhaps Schelling and Hegel, all the German romanticists, be that the Stegel brothers, for example, or even Goethe and Schiller, not to be counted as romantics, by the way, just to make this clear, or Schopenhauer, who completely misunderstands Kant. But at least you will know how he misunderstands Kant, because there's no hidden Spinocism in Kant. Or, for that matter, going further to some more obscure theories today, such as accelerationism, etc., if you have an interest in that, you must understand the transcendental logic that Kant presents in the first critique predominantly. And that is what we will be focusing on, but also really to understand our modern age of scientific control and techno-scientific control and sort of the disappearance of essence and I would say the disappearance of essence in the noumenal, to put it a bit poetically, is unfortunately something that we can lay at Kant's feet. So we will consider why Kant is here really the philosopher to read, to consider, if we want to understand the modern techno-scientific world. To say this again, I've said it many times, if you can get on an airplane without breaking out in fear and trembling, then you are a firm believer in transcendental idealism, even if you've never heard of it, because it is thanks to transcendental idealism that we can fly airplanes and drive buses and use spaceships, etc. So that is something to consider, because that very logic that Kant writes is one that allows for the application. It's no longer just an organon logic. Logic is raised to a higher level of reflection here. And with Hegel, hence, becomes metaphysics itself in the science of logic. So this is the Kant course for anyone who wants to understand not only Kant, but also wants to gain an understanding of our age. You must at least have read some Immanuel Kant, some of his critiques. That begins April 20th. Link to enroll is in the description of this video. And last but not least, we have a course which will begin either end of May or early June on this will be Sunday evenings, taught by Sean McFadden, who taught the Philosophy of the Machine course last year. You should still find plenty of videos with him here on my channel. So Sean will teach a course on the dynamics of power. And Sean wants to present power in a unified approach. And he'll be looking at Plato and Aristotle to begin with. That's the first lecture and seminar, will be Plato and Aristotle. Followed by a reading of Edward Bernays and also Adam Curtis's The Century of the Self documentary. He will then read Carl Schmitt, Foucault, and Bertrand de Chauvenel, if I pronounce this correctly. Probably not. But if you have an interest in power, and beyond just the confines of Foucauldianism, then this course is for you. Enrollment is not yet open, but if you go to our homepage and you just scroll down a bit here, right here, type in your email, and so you register your interest. And when we open enrollment, which should be sometime in mid-May, then we'll let you know first. So get on the list if you have an interest in power, and make sure to listen to what Sean had to say on the machine last year. If you joined Sean's machine course, then perhaps this is also one for you to take. And you can see also that if you'd like to take all three of them, there's actually enough time. So you could, because we've got John Revicki's course starts next week on Friday, and then my Kant course begins about 3 weeks later. And there's enough breaks in between, so you could read some Kant, but then also come back to the readings in John's course. And with Sean's course, as you can hear, we all have the same first name, just different iterations of it. John, Johannes, and Sean. You could then take Sean's course on power, and that, as I said, probably early June is when we begin with that one. So the Kant course will almost be over by that time. So you could take all three if you wanted to. Or you could just focus on one. And if you focus on one, you would have to go with that one that obviously is most pertinent to your own studies at the moment. So if you're already studying power, then perhaps take the power course. If you're interested in experimental theology, then John's course is for you. If you're interested in Kant, then you should take my Kant course. So again, we have John Revecki's course, Ultimate Reality, God and Beyond, beginning next week, Friday, April 5th. Then second is my course on Kant with a focus on the critique of pure reason. But we'll also read sections from the critique of practical reason and from the third critique as well. So that's a 9-week course, 8 seminars and live lectures, plus one final seminar, the pro seminar, where you can present a talk or a poem. Well, I don't know if Kant inspires poetry, he might. Hölderlin said about Kant that he's the Moses of our nation. So he's the Moses of the Germans. That's what Hölderlin thought. And it is a remarkable time that begins with Kant. In 40 years, system after system, poetry after poetry, springs up in the German lands, from the German language. And Schelling is the only one who gets to look back on it and realizes that the world that could have been did not come to pass. But it is still, of course, one of the most... well, I think Schiller, in his... if you listen to the European anthem, Beethoven's Ninth, Freude schöner Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, daughter from Elysium. I think Schiller really brings it together the most. What this age was about. I'm looking for a for a translation. This is the Ode to Joy is the official title, the An die Freude in German. Let me just... I want to make sure that what I say is not that it is proper English. Joy, thou shining spark of the gods, daughter of Elysium, with fiery rapture, goddess, we approach thy shrine or thy sacred place. Your magic reunites those whom stern custom has parted. All men will become brothers under your protective wing. So I think that encapsulates the spirit of the age the best. And also the intense innerness of that time, the interiority that is... So what German idealism achieves, if we want to call it that time period, German idealism, German romanticism, is the movement into the inner. And again, here's a quote from Schiller: "It is not outside, they're fools to implore, it is in you, you bring it forth evermore." So, the innerness, the interiority, the ideas, or the idea itself, begins to be not subjective, but to be found within oneself. And of course the I, the logical I that is always in play, isn't a personal I, or ego, so it should not be conflated with anything psychological or psychiatric, or much worse, psychoanalytical, but instead is ultimately, of course, divine, connected to the divine logos. And that awakens here. So the inner becomes the outer, and the outer becomes the inner. So I'd like to invite you to all of our courses. Of course, I would be very pleased to see you at the My Kant course, if you can make it. But I hope to see you perhaps at John Vervaeke's course, and if you can't make that one, then maybe you could join our course on power, taught by Sean McFadden. All right, I'm signing off now. Good night.